Tomato, tomato. Snowmageddon, Icemageddon, those are phrases that I heard. While I was out and about, I took a picture of our Icemageddon. Maybe not. It was cold, though. But there was not so much ice. That could be okay. Um, it was supposed to ice, and we weren't supposed to have church. So I didn't plan a sermon? Can I use that excuse? Let's all stand and sing. Actually, I have 2 sermons. And I don't know which one to preach today. Both of them. You know, preaching is kind of an odd thing. On one hand, I try to plan things out and think, okay, what are some good messages that are needed, would be encouraging, beneficial? I ask myself questions like, what are we really bad at? And then I'll preach on those things. No, I really don't ask those questions. But then also you have the spiritual side of things where you try and pay attention to things that are happening, that are going on in the world. Maybe God's trying to say something and he's just not using a burning bush, but he's using some other things to talk and speak about. And in the process of that, I've ended up with 2 sermons. And I don't know how to decide, is God saying do this one and not that one? Is that one a bad one? This is a good one? Are we saving one for late? I don't know. And so I've decided on a very good method. We're going to vote. We have Sermon A and we have Sermon 1. It's not A and B because then you might think B is inferior or came second or whatever. So it's Sermon A and Sermon 1. And that's about all I'm going to let you know. Do you want Sermon 1 or do you want Sermon A? So I'll put Sermon 1 in my left pocket and Sermon A in my right pocket. All right. This didn't work out well in class because I asked the question and people didn't raise their hands. You have to raise your hands on this one, okay? So we have Sermon 1 and Sermon A, okay? So if you want Sermon 1, raise your hand. Okay, I'm going to take a quick sermon. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. All right, Sermon B. A. Sermon A's have it. There. All right, good. And if it was wrong, you'll never know because we surveyed very quickly. All right, we had Sermon A. Sermon A was, oh yeah, okay. Snowmageddon, Icemageddon. It was a rather interesting weekend. Schools were canceled. On Friday, I had to go and register for something, and I come walking up to the door, and it said, we're closing at noon. And I went, 11:59, yes! And I went in. Things were closing early. Things were being canceled. I went to Walmart because I had to buy hot dog buns. Well, because I'd gone and I'd bought hot dogs because my wife put hot dogs on my list. And I should have bought hot dog buns, and I didn't. And so I went later on, and I go to the bread section. You know how many loaves of bread there were? There was one. Like the super greedy kind where it's like you're eating bird food or something? You know how many hot dog buns there were? None. So I settled on something else, and as I'm checking out, there's this family, and they have 3 cartloads overflowing with goods. And my first thought was, they have a bigger family than I do. We only fill 2 carts. And then they were like, I heard them talking with the cash register person. They said, well, we're going to be prepared for this, ice. I went, oh. That's right. And I should have bought hot dog buns a couple days ago to beat the rush. And then, let's see, what are some other things that I noticed? Um, Propane tanks were out. There was a lot of that. Let's see. Oh, did you know that we are going to be without power for 10 days? I heard that one. And then I heard lots of references back to 2002. Now, I guess 2002 was the last legitimately big ice storm that we had that affected us here, correct? And I've heard stories about that. I mean, weather can cause lots of damage. And it's important to be prepared for weather. But as I was thinking about these things, I kept looking outside going, but there's nothing happening. And I began to think about the difference between reacting and responding. They can be similar. They're both done because something happened or is going to happen, and so they're both as an effect of that, whatever it was. But I think there's a little bit of a difference between a reaction and a response. And so we see this little image up here with a little equal sign with a slash through it that says is not equal to. So reaction is not equal to responding. I want to lay this out a little bit, kind of let you know where I'm coming from. Then we'll look at some scriptures. Reacting. We have this phrase, a knee-jerk reaction, okay? We've gone to the doctor, and at some point, most of the time when they're little, they're testing your little reflexes, and so he takes a little hammer out, and he hits your knee, and hopefully your leg kind of has a little twitch to it, okay? It's just a knee-jerk reaction. You can't control it. It just happens. And if you were anything like me, then you went home and you got a real hammer, and you tried to proceed and do it to your siblings, and they had reactions to that. A reaction is often very short. It's often an immediate reaction, not much time to think about it. Reactions often are in response to our insides, our emotions, our feelings. And so we get anger and we say something out of anger. Or in fear, we do something very quickly and rash sometimes. And so they talk about the fight or flight response. Fear kicks in, something makes you afraid, and you either A, put your gloves up, or B, you take off running, okay? But those are reactions. They're immediate responses. They don't take much thought, and a lot of times they get us into trouble because it leads to your parents saying something like, "What were you thinking?" "I wasn't thinking, I was just reacting," just doing. So that's reacting. Responding takes a little more time. Often. That's not all the time, but most often a response is thought out. It's planned for. It happens at an appropriate time. And so do you see the difference between a response and a reaction? Reaction, when my son John was just a little guy, he was learning how to walk. He weighed next to nothing, and like most kids, he latched onto legs for balance or whatnot. Well, one of these times, all of a sudden came this sharp pain right here in the back of my leg. You know where it really hurts? And I had a reaction. And my poor little John literally flew across the room sideways and hit the wall. And then my next reaction was, "I'm sorry, are you okay?" And he has this look of, what just happened? But it was a reaction. I had no control. He bit the back of my leg right here. And it was this sharp pain, and my leg just went like that, and he flew. Reaction. It wasn't good. Luckily, John was okay. A response. Lisa and I are doing some counseling right now, working with DHS and foster care. We have to do some of these things, and one of the things that they're working on is how do you say things in a positive manner? Most of the time, as parents, as adults, as teachers, when you see a child doing something that they should not do, you say, "Stop it! Don't do that." And what the idea behind putting things in the positive is you want to get them to think about what they're doing. So instead of, stop touching the microphone, you say, keep your hands to yourself. And so then, theoretically, the kids are thinking, keep my hands to myself, keep my hands to myself. Instead of, don't touch it, don't touch it, don't touch it, don't touch it. I couldn't help it. I was just thinking about it. And most people are the same way. Don't do this means, it's like, well, why? Is it fun? You think about the lie that Satan used in the beginning with Eve. You're missing out. Did God really say you shouldn't do all those things? Oh, it would be fun, right? Oh, you're right. Reaction versus response. Reactions are often short-term. Responses are often long-term. Look at some scriptures. I've grouped them into two sections. The first is in regards to our tongue. Our tongue does a lot of reacting. And there's a lot of scriptures to it. Somebody hurts us, and so we lash out very quickly with our tongue. So I've got a few scriptures to look at. Proverbs chapter 1, and actually the PowerPoint goes along with this sermon. So you picked the right one. However, the life group questions don't go with this one, so maybe you picked the wrong one. Proverbs chapter 21, verse 23. And I'll just read a couple of these because you'll get the idea quickly. Proverbs 21, verse 23 says this, whoever keeps his mouth and his tongue keeps himself out of trouble. Whoever keeps his mouth and keeps his tongue keeps himself out of trouble. We might add, whoever keeps his mouth shut might keep himself out of trouble. But we get the idea. It takes a lot to control our tongue sometimes. We want to say something, we want to interject. Instead, sometimes we just need to listen. Proverbs 15, verse 1. A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh answer turns away anger. And this is kind of where we get into that phrasing things in the positive way. Do you know how hard it is to put things in the positive? Stop running. Quit yelling. Don't touch those things. That's wrong. Don't stop. No, no, no. Do you know how hard it is to put something in the positive? Don't touch that. Okay? Let me stop. Keep your hands to yourself. And so in my house right now, there's a lot of, don't. Play with your own toys, not my tools. It takes a lot to speak gently and calmly instead of the harsh. The harsh comes quick. The harsh is a reaction. The calmness is a response. And children need that. Who likes being yelled at? And yet we yell a lot. All right, James chapter 1, verse 19. James chapter 1, starting in verse 19. Know this, my beloved brothers. Let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. For the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. Therefore, put away all filthiness and rampant wickedness and receive with meekness the implanted word, which is able to save your souls. So what does it say? Be quick to listen, slow to speak, so respond, and slow to anger. Oh, being slow to anger, that's one of those ones that, a lot of the biblical teachings are very, very hard. Be slow to be angry. Be slow to get angry. How fast does it take you to get angry? This long? Me too. You know how fast it takes? I'm driving along, all of a sudden somebody's in front of me, and I'm angry. I hear a crash from the kitchen. I'm angry. I see some kid with their finger in paint. I'm like, didn't I just tell you don't touch the paint? Oh, that's because I said don't touch it, and so they wanted to touch it. It takes this amount of time to be angry, and so yet the Bible says, be slow to be angry. How do you control that? Doesn't it just happen? Yes, it does. And yet we're supposed to be slow to anger. You and me, Houston, we can work on that one together. The next thing, turn to Matthew chapter 25. Matthew 25, Jesus tells this story, often called the parable of the talents. And most of the time it's used to talk about a different way of life, using the gifts that God has given to us. But I also think that this reaction versus response plays out in this passage. Verse 14, it'll be like a man who's going on a journey, and he calls his servants and entrusted to them his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1. So a talent is a type of money. So he's giving his servants his money to take care of while the master is gone. And then he went away. Verse 16, he who had received the 5 talents went on at once and traded with them, and he made 5 talents more. So he doubled it. So also he who had 2 talents went and made 2 talents more, also doubling it. But he who had received 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. Now after a long time, the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. And he who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here I have made 5 more talents. His master said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. And he does the same thing. The guy with 2 talents comes forward, and he brings 2 talents, and he says, well done, good and faithful servant. Verse 24, and he also who had received the 1 talent came forward, saying, Master, I knew you were a hard man, reaping where you do not sow, and gathering where you do not scatter. So I was afraid, and I went and I hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours. But his master answered him, you wicked and slothful servant. You knew that I reap where I have not sown and gathered where I have not scattered seed. You ought to have at least invested my money in the bankers, and at coming I would have received my interest. And so he took the talent and gave it to another one. The man with 1 talent, he had a reaction. And he even says what caused his reaction. He goes, I was afraid. And so he let his internal fear make him react, and he buried it. And then his master comes and says, you could have at least put it in the bank and earned 0.03% interest. Yet his fear caused him to react. The others, they responded. They knew that their master, the same master, was a hard man, drove a hard bargain, and so they invested and they worked and they doubled their money. A reaction versus a response. Jesus healed 10 lepers. If you recount in the story, Jesus finds the lepers, he heals them, he sends them off. How many lepers came back? 1. See, all 10 had a reaction and they went away and rejoiced, but 1 had a response. And he stopped and he returned to Jesus and he said, thank you. He responded. The rich young ruler was told to sell everything that he had, and he went away sad. A reaction. Jesus called the disciples. He said, come and follow me. And they had a response. But wait, that was immediate. Yes, but how do you know the difference between a reaction and a response? Reactions are often temporary. A response is often permanent. September 11th, several years ago, happened. The Sundays immediately afterwards, churches were filled. Why? Reactions. Reaction out of fear, out of worry. So we turned to God. But because it was a reaction, you get 2 months and things are back to normal. A response is a person who dedicates their life to God. And 30 years later, they are still faithful to God. Why? Because it wasn't a reaction, because it was a response. How do we live our lives? Are we going to live our lives with knee-jerk reactions to things that we hear going on in the news? Our fear, it plays on our worry. Advertising knows that. News knows that. And they feed that inside of us. And so, did you hear what's going to happen? It's going to rain. Oh, I heard it was going to snow. It's going to snow. We're going to be without power for 10 days. Oh, no, we got to spend $300. Well, they're going to be well stocked for a month now. It can be a reaction. A response, we watch the news and we say, it looks like there's going to be a storm. Are we prepared? Let's make sure, is everything taken care of? We got what we need in case we have power or in case we lose power. It's a response. It's thought out. It's planned. One causes confusion. One causes calmness. There's a lot of stuff that we hear in the news. The Bible talks about this. You'll hear rumors of wars and things like that. We can react to it or we can respond to it. In our faith, we can react to God. And when things go bad, God will be there. Or we can respond to God. I hope that we can be people who respond to God. And we will be people who are faithful this week and next week and 30 years from now, Lord willing, if that's how long we're alive. May we be people who respond to God, not simply react. When you look at the people that chose to follow Jesus, great crowds and multitudes followed him. Look at what he's doing. We want to see a miracle, a reaction. How many people were with Jesus when he was crucified? 5, 6, 7, a handful of people responded. We're going to have a song. If somebody needs to respond and make Jesus the Lord of your life, a lifelong commitment, then do that. This isn't a reaction. A reaction will be short-lived. A response takes a lifetime. Somebody has a prayer concern, a request, we need to gather around and pray together, we'll do that. We have elders will come forward, and we can spend time in prayer this morning. Let's stand together. Let's lift our voices in song.
I've been bought with blood. I am mine no more. Jesus is my Lord. Jesus is my Lord. And he rules my life. Jesus is my take me home. He will come again, and I am mine no more. I am mine no more. I've been bought with blood. I am mine no more. Please be seated. And later, after we get through with everything else, as you guys depart, seek justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. Thank you. I'm D. Plummer.
What more can I say? Praise God for your presence this morning. Thank you for being here. And I'm sure God smiles down upon humanity today here in our area and says, you know, oh, ye of little faith. And good to see everyone out this morning, especially those who are visiting. We want to acknowledge your presence with us. We have some children that are going to come down the aisle here, and as they do, if you are a guest this morning with us, we want you to raise your hand so they can share with you